Welcome back to Vesting Talk Podcast. Today, we're going to take a closer look at Birks Group, ticker symbol BGI, and try to make sense of it as an investment opportunity right now. And what's kind of throwing me off is they just had some really good news about their holiday sales, but the stock has been in a downtrend for a long time, and some analysts think it's going to keep dropping. So how do we square that?
Yeah, it's a real head scratcher, right? It's like the market's giving us mixed signals. On the one hand, things look pretty good, but we really have to dig a little deeper to understand what's going on.
Yeah, okay. So let's start with the good news first. Birks Group, they had a 4% sales increase during the 2025 holiday season, and comparable store sales, which are always a key metric for retailers, were up 1.3%. And that's on top of a pretty strong 2024 fiscal year where they had a 13.7% jump in total net sales and a 7.5% rise in comparable store sales.
Exactly, and a big part of that success is their strategy of focusing more on third-party brands, especially in watches and jewelry. That segment was a major growth driver both during the holidays and throughout the whole fiscal year.
Interesting. So shifting toward those more popular, I guess you could say, brands could be a really smart move to increase their margins. But here's the thing that doesn't make sense to me. BGII has been on a downtrend since like the year 2000. As right now, as we're recording this, is trading at $1.77. And some analysts are forecasting that it could drop to 96 cents within a year, which would be a drop of almost 46%.
Yeah, that's right. We can't ignore that long-term trend. It's definitely something to keep in mind. But then you have other analysts who are predicting some pretty wild, optimistic growth. Some are saying BGI, I could reach $4.47 by 2030 and even $20.56 by 2050. So it makes you wonder how reliable these long-term forecasts actually are.
Yeah, it's definitely a lot to consider. So how do we, as investors, cut through all this noise and try to figure out like what's actually going to happen? What do we look at besides the news and these super long-term forecasts?
Well, I think one thing we can do is go beyond just the headlines and look at some technical indicators, which can give us a more immediate snapshot of market sentiment.
Right, technical analysis.
Yeah.
Okay, so what are some of the key indicators that we should be looking at? And can you explain it in a way that someone who maybe isn't super familiar with technical analysis can understand?
Sure. So one of the most basic but still very useful indicators is the moving average. So we can look at the 20-day, the 50-day, the 100-day, and the 200-day moving averages. And basically, those just show us the average price of the stock over those time periods. Right now, BAGI is actually trading below all four of those moving averages, which is generally seen as a bearish signal. It kind of suggests that the stock price might continue to go down.
Okay, so those moving averages are pointing to more decline. Are there any other indicators that we should be considering here?
Yeah, there's the RSI, which stands for Relative Strength Index, and that measures the magnitude of recent price changes to try to figure out if a stock is overbought or oversold. Right now, the RSI for BGI is neutral, so it doesn't seem like the stock is excessively priced in either direction.
Okay, so that's one that's not like waving a red flag at us.
Right.
What else?
Well, there's the MACD, which is short for Moving Average Convergence Divergence, and it's a momentum indicator that looks at the relationship between two moving averages of prices. For BGI, the MACD is currently giving us a sell signal.
So two for the bears and one neutral. Overall, are we concerned about BGI based on these indicators?
Well, we can't just brush off those bearish signals from the moving averages and the MACD, but it's important to remember that these technical indicators are just one piece of the puzzle. We also need to consider the things Birks Group is doing, their strategy, like their focus on these higher margin third-party brands, and the fact that they're renovating their stores. Those efforts could attract new customers and help them grow, even if the overall market is a bit shaky.
Yeah, it does seem like they're trying to change with the times, appeal to new customers. But how does that fit into the bigger picture of the luxury goods market in general? And what are some of the risks we need to be thinking about when we're thinking about investing in BGI?
Okay, well, that's what we'll get into next time, so stay tuned. The luxury goods market is kind of interesting, because it tends to reflect what's happening in the overall economy. So when the economy is doing well, people tend to spend more on luxury items. But when there's uncertainty, they might cut back on those kinds of purchases, the things they don't absolutely need.
So I guess what you're saying is that Birks Group is trying to make this comeback in a sector that's very sensitive to how the economy is doing.
Yeah.
That sounds pretty risky.
Yeah, it definitely has its risks, but there's also potential for them to do well, focusing on those high demand brands. And like we said, they're renovating their stores. All that could attract a whole new group of luxury consumers. But again, we got to remember that BGI is in this market that's kind of sending mixed signals. Like we talked about, they're having good sales, but then you have this long-term downtrend and those technical indicators that are pointing down.
Yeah, it's confusing for sure. So what would you say about the risk level of investing in BGI right now?
I think it's probably a medium risk investment. The stock has average daily price swings, and the trading volume is decent, so that means there's potential for it to go up, but there's also the potential for it to go down.
Okay, so not something for someone who's really risk averse,
Hmm.
but maybe an interesting opportunity for investors who are comfortable with a little bit of volatility.
Mm.
So taking all of this into account, what would you say to someone who's thinking about buying BGI?
Well, I think the main thing is to remember that there are a lot of factors at play here. We've talked about the good things like their recent performance, but we've also talked about those long-term trends and the technical indicators that suggest maybe being a little cautious.
Right, it's like we have all these puzzle pieces and some of them fit together and some of them don't. So how can we help our listeners put all these pieces together and make a smart decision for themselves?
The most important thing is to do your own research. Don't just take anyone's word for it, even ours.
Yeah, we're just trying to give some insights and analysis,
Hmm.
but ultimately it's up to each individual investor to decide what to do with their money.
Right. Every investor needs to do their own due diligence. They need to understand the company, Birks Group in this case, and they need to think about their own financial goals and how much risk they're comfortable with.
Yeah, that makes sense.
So, to our listeners out there, think about everything we've discussed. We've talked about how Birks Group is doing right now, the long-term trends, the technical indicators, and the overall economic situation. Based on all of that, what stands out to you? What are the most important factors that you would consider before making a decision about investing in BGI?
Yeah, that's a really good question to think about. It really gets at the heart of what we're trying to do here, which is to help people make smart investment decisions, not just based on, whatever they happen to hear on the news or how they're feeling that day.
Absolutely. Investing is all about being informed and making choices that align with your own goals and your own risk tolerance. We've tried to present a balanced picture of Birks Group today, highlighting both the potential upsides and the potential downsides.
We've covered a lot, from their recent sales success to those long-term stock trends and the technical indicators. But at the end of the day, the choice of whether or not to invest in Birks Group, ticker symbol BGI, is yours.
Right. And that's what makes the stock market so interesting. There's always opportunity out there, but it takes some work, some analysis, and a willingness to keep learning and adapting to make the most of it.
I think that's a great point. So we hope this episode of Investing Talk podcast has given you some food for thought as you continue on your investing journey.
If you found this conversation helpful, we'd love for you to share it with other investors who might be interested in Birks Group or just in learning more about how to analyze investment opportunities. And be sure to subscribe to the Investing Talk podcast for more in-depth discussions on the companies and trends that are shaping the market.
And if you have any thoughts on Birks Group, we'd love to hear them. Leave us a comment and let us know your perspective. Thanks for listening, everyone. Happy investing.